Good evening, New Hanover County Schools. I am Caress Clegg, and this is Brandon Shope. We are with New Hanover County Schools Communications Division. With us here, we have Dr. LaShawn Smith, Deputy Superintendent of New Hanover County Schools. And she leads the Teaching and Learning Work Group tasked with developing instruction plans for the 2020-21 school year under Plans B and C.
And now Dr. Smith is going to be answering questions that the work group has addressed at the district level regarding instruction under both plans. Questions that are still under discussion will be taken back to the work group for consideration, and responses will actually be shared by the Latino Alliance and the school district at nhcs.net. We're so excited to have you here with us tonight, Dr. Smith.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to share with our families and to respond to questions that they may have.
Well, thank you. Again, Dr. Smith, we just, some of the questions that we've been seeing in are commonly asked questions, either coming in through the community input form or coming in on social media. So we're just going to jump right into it and ask you to explain to our families the difference in instructional options that we have under Plans B and C. So what is remote learning versus the virtual academy?
So let's start with the virtual academy. And I think probably for families, the first question they need to ask themselves is, at any point, do I want my child to return to public schools this year? And if they answer the question that at this time during this year, I don't want my child to receive in-person instruction, I don't want my child to attend school, to physically attend school, then the option they should choose for their family is the virtual academy. With remote instruction, students are going to be in school for, at the very least, a week of face-to-face instruction, followed by 2 weeks of online instruction. And that is what it will look like as a part of Plan B. Now, we are starting the school year in Plan C. And I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes in, because Plan C for remote instruction looks a lot like Virtual Academy. But with Virtual Academy, again, the very first question I think that families need to ask and answer for themselves is whether or not they want their child to return to in-person schooling this year. And again, if they answer no, then Virtual Academy is the choice. Now, to talk about the difference between the two instructionally, because the parent is carrying a lot of the responsibility in the virtual academy, we wanted it to make it as easy to navigate for the parent as we could. So for the district, we decided on a district-wide platform for the virtual academy. And so it very much is intuitive. When students are sitting and they see their desktop and their screen, there's a routine to it. And it allows for parents to have greater flexibility as to when students are engaged in their work for the week. Now, this is not an independent study course. It is not a course that is completely self-directed by students. There are teachers that are supporting these students. There are teachers that are customizing lessons and personalizing instruction for students who need additional instruction. But for the most part, what happens is that within this course shell, the lessons are already built. They're already built in a very similar format, which again makes it much easier for parents to support their students in this learning. But there are New Hanover County Schools teachers who are supporting and instructing students as a part of this. Most of the lessons are asynchronous, and I know we're going to talk about that, what that means. And essentially, asynchronous means on your own. It doesn't mean that it's live. If we talk about synchronous, then we're talking about those lessons being live. With the remote learning, again, it looks very different, because with that, you're going to come into the school, you're going to receive a week's worth of face-to-face instruction, and then your online will continue with asynchronous lessons, students following very scheduled activities that are determined by their classroom teacher with very specific due dates. There will be opportunities for collaboration among classmates, and it's very much driven and personalized by the teacher.
Fantastic, Dr. Smith. Is there anything else you'd like to add when it comes to synchronous and asynchronous before we move on?
So no, just again to reiterate that synchronous means that it's live. So if we're engaged in a synchronous lesson at 9 o'clock, that means the teacher is present online at 9 and the students are present at 9 as well. If it's an asynchronous lesson, it may be that the teacher posts the lesson Monday morning at 8 a.m. and says, by Tuesday afternoon at 2, I need you to view this lesson and complete the activity that might be associated with it.
Fantastic. Well, now, Dr. Smith, that's all fantastic information, for our parents to know at home. Just let us know a little bit about, please, what the deadline, what is the deadline to notify the district of a family's preference for remote learning or the virtual academy, and then, just if we can elaborate on that a little bit.
So we do have a deadline for the virtual academy, and we're asking all families who are interested in their children not returning to in-person instruction to let us know by close of business tomorrow. So that is the deadline for selecting a virtual academy for your student. Also, I think it's important for folks to know is if you select virtual academy and you find that this absolutely is not a good fit for your family, then we're only asking you to make the commitment through the first 9 weeks. So even if you commit on the front end, we're only asking you to commit through the first 9 weeks. So if it's not a good fit, then after the first 9 weeks, if you're in elementary or middle school, you can make a change. For high school students, we're asking them to make a semester-long commitment. And of course, that's associated with students beginning courses and then ending those courses and not and eliminating transitions in the middle of those courses.
Thank you, Dr. Smith, for that. I know you talked a little bit about the platforms and what Virtual Academy will be, what it works through. Can you give parents a little more understanding on the different platforms and learning options that will be under remote learning and Virtual Academy the tools that our teachers will be using?
So yes, so for the learning management systems in K2 and halfway through 3rd grade, parents who students are enrolled in remote learning, they will be utilizing Seesaw. And it's very interactive. Many of our families are, if you have younger children, you are already familiar with that because it's very popular with our teachers. In grades, well, middle of 3rd grade through 4th and 5th grade, we're transitioning students to Google Classroom. So for middle of 3rd grade through 5th grade, they will be using Google Classroom. In the middle school, primarily, you'll see Google Classroom again. So in grades 6 through 8, you will see Google Classroom. And then at the high school, we have asked our high school teachers to primarily use Canvas. There may be a few courses that will be transitioning from Google Classroom to Canvas mid-semester, but primarily Canvas is the high school learning management system. And essentially the commonalities with all of them is that they are learning management systems. Teachers can post assignments, provide feedback, grade assignments, things of that nature. But the level of interactiveness and the age appropriateness of each was a driver in why the district chose the specific platforms for the specific grade levels. Now in Virtual Academy, what parents are going to be utilizing is a third-party software, and that third-party software is called Edgenuity.
Well, Dr. Smith, say a child, parents say they applied for a virtual academy. When will they know if their child was actually accepted into that program?
So as hopefully most of our families know, open houses are taking place this week. And so we're issuing schedules. And so I would say to a family no later than Friday, because there's so much that's happening in such a short period of time. But at this point, many of our families should know. And for the most part, those folks who applied have been accepted. There are just a few exceptions where schools are reaching out to families to clarify and make sure that the choice that the family chose is the choice that they intended to choose. You know, we've sent out many surveys and asked for a lot of information from families. And even with our virtual academy applications, we've seen some students who've been enrolled 3 or 4 times. So we're wanting to make sure that the choices that families have made are the ones that they intended to make. So many of our schools are calling families and talking to them personally. But what I would say to you is that if you haven't already heard, if you could just reach out to your child's school, leave a message, email the principal, then I'm sure that they will get in contact with you and let you know whether they have you as attending the virtual academy or being enrolled in remote learning.
Thank you, Dr. Smith, for sharing that. A question I'm seeing coming in from parents on our Facebook chat right now, they're wondering, and I know you've talked a lot about this when you mentioned it at the July 31st board meeting. What is the difference in our online instruction that our students will be receiving now versus what they received in the spring?
So what occurred in the spring, we are referring to as emergency closure. And so we found out essentially on a Friday that we would not be in school on Monday. And that did not give us a lot of time to plan. And so we created a schedule that allowed teachers with just a little bit of time before we went into spring break to design online learning and also to get themselves up to speed in terms of learning management systems. And so very much I would say that a lot was based upon teacher preference, teacher comfort, and there were, you know, just a response to the situation in and of itself. And so sometimes people refer this to pandemic teaching. And so we've learned a lot of lessons. We've gotten some really great feedback from teachers. We've gotten some really great feedback from our families as well. And so what we've done now is we're much, much more intentional about the online learning. And so as I've shared, we've landed on specific learning platforms for specific grade levels and in a very intentional way. We also have selected Edgenuity to serve as our learning management system for Virtual Academy, specifically taking into mind that parents are going to be key in supporting students in their home learning. And we have put together a very robust professional development menu for our teachers in relation to online learning, learning management system, and also district curriculums. That was something else. You know, we were not prepared to take what we were doing face-to-face and transition it to an online environment. And this summer, we've spent quite a bit of time of creating lessons for teachers that takes the curriculum that we would otherwise deliver face-to-face, and how do you engage with students in an online remote environment. And then also a lot of our professional development that otherwise would have been designed around face-to-face delivery of the curriculum has been shifted. We've requested this, of course, of our vendors, has been shifted to, so how do you provide this instruction in an online environment? And so again, the word I would use here is really the intentionality around the planning and the implementation. And our commitment to families is around quality. We want to make sure that any learning loss that might have occurred, that we recoup it very, very quickly, and that our children are in classrooms and receiving instruction that is of quality, and that they are engaged in learning tasks that are designed to sustain their attention and make sure that they're learning at appropriate levels.
Yes, ma'am. Excellent. All right. Well, Dr. Smith, thank you so much for that as well. We have the community surveys and the things that we put out have really been so insightful. Just being able to gain so much input from the community. One of the questions that we're seeing as well, will students with limited English still receive ESL services?
So yes, so students with disabilities, students who are receiving EL services, students who are receiving AIG services, those services will continue for all those students. Now, it will look very, very different because again, our main method of delivery prior to the pandemic was face-to-face. And so our teachers who are extremely talented have worked very, very hard to design instruction and to create opportunities to continue to deliver that instruction. So those services will continue, but they will be delivered remotely.
And I imagine that's going to be the same for our MTSS tiers as well, as far as receiving those services, Dr. Smith?
So yeah, so our obligation to our children has not changed. And what I talk about with folks is our goals remain the same. And our goals have always been to ensure that we're providing the highest quality of instructional service. So that access to high quality curriculum, high quality instruction in those very, as I spoke about before, those meaningful learning tasks that require, our children to do that critical thinking. So the goals are the same. What has changed really has been our strategies and our tactics for delivering that. So MTSS, the multi-tiered support will continue for those students as well. But again, it will look very, very different.
Dr. Smith, now I've talked, with several parents on the phone and, through email and things like that over the last few weeks. And a question that has come to us as well, if a child is in remote learning, but they need to switch over to the virtual academy in the first session, what is that process for them and vice versa as well?
So we've seen a lot of interest in the virtual academy. And so as a result of that, we're having to create a wait list. And so we're encouraging families that if you are interested in your child not returning to face-to-face instruction this school year, to go ahead and complete that virtual academy application. At this point, we feel strongly that we can accommodate all who apply at this point. But if folks decide to apply after the fact, then it would depend on whether there would be a seat available. Now, this is not the case with remote learning. So if a family feels that virtual academy is just not a good fit after that first 9 weeks, then they can always transition to remote learning.
I've heard where some of our parents and families are worried about knowing how to access the platforms we use and manage the technology devices that we send home. What support are we offering for those families?
So we have actually discussed this in our teaching and learning work group. And so we will be posting online videos for families to help them navigate through this, almost like a parent at a university. And then for parents who need more than that, they can reach out to their schools and the schools can let us know. And we could even host live events that would help families navigate through these platforms, through these technology tools, and through the resources.
So what you're saying is you're up for doing another Facebook Live session like this again for our families.
Now, it will not be me, but I'll tell you this, I am so privileged to work with some incredible folks who understand the technical side of this, and more likely than not, it would be them.
Excellent, excellent, Dr. Smith. We appreciate that. Well, it looks like, Caress, we have some extra time here to take some questions from Facebook Live here from some of our viewers. Caress, if you want to kick that off.
We did see a question regarding fall sports. Dr. Smith, can you provide any information regarding fall sports? I know the North Carolina High School Association, Athletic Association did release some news yesterday. Is there anything you can share with our families viewing now regarding that?
So I don't have the exact date, but it's my understanding that the North Carolina High School Athletic Association has postponed football until February. I think the statement that was made was that we want to maintain hope, that we're going to be able to carry through and have these athletic activities, but we also want to move very cautiously in terms of moving forward. So right now we know that football is scheduled for February.
Thank you for that.
Okay, fantastic. All right, Dr. Smith. So once the school district, this is a question that came in, once the school district decides to move to Plan B, will families be surveyed again to decide whether to switch to Plan B or to the virtual academy?
So they will not, because again, we've had such interest with virtual academy that in all likelihood, there would be a waiting list. And so we're asking folks, if they are not interested in their children attending face-to-face instruction, for them to make their application to the virtual academy. And again, that the closeout date for that is tomorrow. So we would not be surveying families again. Now, of course, if there's a family who is in virtual academy and would like to transition to remote learning, then that option would be made available to them.
Dr. Smith, there's a question about pre-K, and I don't know whether you can answer this one, and if not, we can surely go back and find the answer for this family. But is Virtual Academy available for our pre-K students?
So it is at this time, and there is believe it or not, another learning management system that they're going to be using. And I don't want to put it out there and get it incorrect, but it is. So if there is a family with a pre-K student and they do not want that child to receive in-person instruction, then they too can complete that application.
Great, excellent. All right, so looks like this one just came in as well, Dr. Smith, from Facebook. What extra support will the parents receive to understand these platforms that will be used in remote learning? I know there have been questions about that have been coming in.
So again, we're posting resources to the website to support specifically parents, and we're very willing to host live training events if those resources aren't meeting the needs of our parents. And I would just encourage parents to let their schools know, and that way we can schedule those events for families.
Okay. Dr. Smith, are our students who are in Virtual Academy, are they still going to be tied to their school and be able to participate in school extracurriculars and sports?
So yeah, they are associated with their school. So yeah, so if there is a child who families are uncomfortable with them attending school, but would like to have them be a part of extracurricular activities, then those activities are available to them. Just today, we were talking about Science Olympiad. So how do we support our Virtual Academy students in Science Olympiad? And it might be that the practices would be able to be held with a remote option for those students, so that they would not have to attend in person, but that the actual competition, if held face-to-face, maybe the child would be required to be present. And then also something that I think it's important to bring to folks' attention. Right now, there is no waiver for online end-of-grade and end-of-course testing. So at some point, even our Virtual Academy students, if we have end-of-grade and end-of-course assessments this year, will have to come into our buildings to take those assessments. So those are the state required assessments. So we're not talking about interim assessments, but just the state required assessments. Now, a lot can happen between now and when we administer those assessments, but right now there is no waiver for students, even in the remote environment or in the virtual learning environment or the Virtual Academy environment, having a waiver for taking those. So they would have to take those in person.
And I know, Dr. Smith, that our technology folks, they've really been ramping things up. I mean, they really did in the springtime. The summer they've been so busy, and now they're preparing for this as well. Getting those devices cleaned up and updated and all that good stuff. A question that just came into us is what devices are available to students without a device of their own, and when and where will these actually be distributed?
So I know that many schools are already in the process of distributing devices. And so primarily in the elementary, those devices have been iPads. And then in the secondary schools, those devices have been laptops. But I do know that that schools are already distributing those devices to families.
We had a question come in about Edgenuity, and a parent is concerned about the platform. Dr. Smith, can you talk a little bit more about Edgenuity and discuss if this is the core curriculum or if it is a supplement for remote learning?
So it is the core curriculum. And so I guess the question becomes, are we talking about a parent whose child is in virtual academy, or are we talking about a parent whose child is in remote learning? And is it an elementary parent or a secondary parent? So the answer will vary depending on that.
I think with this one, it may be a middle school or elementary parent. And I think they are signed up for virtual academy.
Okay, so the virtual academy with Edgenuity, it is the core curriculum, but again, as I shared earlier, there is a teacher that is associated with that core course. And so what we've done with Edgenuity is we've just simply uploaded the content for the teacher, but the teacher has the ability to modify, to enhance, to delete lessons, to add lessons, and to personalize that for the student. So it is not this, independent study course that a child goes through. The child is not self-teaching. The lessons that are built into that are instructive in nature. And so the expectation is that with that teacher assigned for those content areas, that if a child, just as if they were in face-to-face or in remote learning, had a question, the questions would be answered. If they needed additional instruction, that additional instruction would be provided. And just, we shared recently, and I'm not sure if it has been published to the district's website, but the description for the learning coach. And so what we would add for parents is that they would help their children in advocating for themselves. And so since it's not the synchronous lessons where a child could raise their hand in a lesson and say, hey, I need some extra assistance, it might be the parent emailing the teacher or the student emailing the teacher, or and letting them know that I need some extra help with this. Or is there an opportunity for some additional practice? Or can you review this with me one more time? And so, we need the parent to help advocate for the student and also to encourage the student to advocate for themselves. But it is not an independent study course.
Okay. And I just saw the parent is actually talking about their child will be in remote learning. So can you talk to it about it from the remote learning perspective?
So yes, so with ELA and actually social studies and science, it does represent really the base curriculum. But again, teachers have the ability to personalize, to add to enhance. We wanted to give teachers a common starting point for instruction, but by no means is it the end all be all without our teachers bringing to it their skills, their expertise, and their knowledge. We just did not want to put the burden and responsibility on teachers to start from scratch. Now with our math curriculum and our ELA curriculum in middle school, we are building out district lessons for that that will sit in Google Classroom. And so for the math curriculum, it's open up. And then for the ELA curriculum, and of course, I know exactly what this is, but when you need to call it to the tip of your tongue, it just does not want to always come. It's actually, it's reading fundamentals. And so those lessons have been created and shared across the district. So again, a lot of personalization, a lot of input on the part of teachers, and we want to make sure above all that this is high quality, that it's meeting the needs of our students, and that our teachers are positioned in a way through their training, their skills, their expertise to support students in learning at the highest levels that they can.
And Dr. Smith, I saw a story on the news this morning talking about, communication and how that it's changing things so much. COVID-19 is changing so many things, but, communicating with masks on, and then also not having as much communication whenever we are remote is something, face-to-face communication rather. It's a question that just came in on Facebook. It says, I'm concerned, this is a parent, about the lack of socialization for the children with the virtual academy. Do you have any suggestions to facilitate this for our kids at home virtually? What can they do to kind of still get some socialization?
So and I definitely understand and recognize that concern. And I know that our Student Support Services department has worked very diligently to build out our social and emotional learning curriculum. And that'll be a part of the instruction that our students receive as well. I think a lot of it depends on maybe your community and what opportunities you have. Are your children able to access athletics outside of school? Are there clubs and activities that might be available just through your community and your interests? Are there other families who are choosing Virtual Academy as an option that live in your community that you can connect with? I would say, sharing these concerns directly with the classroom teacher, and maybe students within that group, that class, because they are associated with their schools, will be able to create, almost just like our teachers create professional learning networks, but connect with online communities for our children. And then also, they are still associated with schools. And so schools are still going to have community activities, school-wide activities, and students would be included in these as well. What I'll say is it, of course, will look very, very different. And, some of those things may be remote, and maybe there will be some opportunities, that folks can engage in a socially distanced kind of way. It's just really so hard to know, but we are open to suggestions. We're open to ideas. Every day I talk to a principal, I hear something that's new and innovative, and sometimes those ideas have been shared by their teachers, sometimes they've been shared by their peers, and sometimes they've just been shared from community members. And so what I would say is, to begin with, express any concern you have of that nature to your child's teacher as well as to your child's principal, and find out, are there any planned activities through your child's school? And then from the teacher's perspective, are you planning any, get to know you activities that maybe we can extend beyond the school day? But that is an excellent question.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. I know we're seeing a lot of questions about IEPs and 504s right now. I just want to let parents and families know that we will be doing a second series discussion next week on August 20th with Julie Varnum, Assistant Superintendent for Student Support Services, and she will be here to answer all of those questions pertaining to student support, special education, and health and safety needs. This session right now is specific to our teaching and learning. So Dr. Smith, the next question that we are seeing come in is regarding time commitment for students virtual instruction. How long are students going to be expected per day or per week to participate in instruction online?
And so, it varies by student. I want to say, and I apologize that I don't have it in front of me, that we're going to begin with about 130 minutes for elementary school students, kindergarten age students, and then that increases. But what I think is really important here is to understand that that does not mean tethered to our computer. Those activities could be sharing with a parent, sharing with another adult in the household, sharing with the sibling. It could be the child engaging in independent learning tasks themselves. It even could be the child engaging in self-reflection. So we want to make sure that we're maintaining the number of instructional minutes. But, if you've ever been in a kindergarten classroom, a lot of what our children do looks like play. A lot of what our children do means that they're engaged and involved with other children. They're sharing things verbally, they're drawing, they're creating, they're navigating, they're cutting, and sometimes it's even just, physically moving around the room. And so those are the types of things that we want families to understand, that that is included in that instructional time as well. So it's not about a child being tethered to a computer. Now, of course, as children get older, we expect that their attention spans are longer. And so the giving a high school student and expecting them to attend to a 30-minute Zoom or or engaged in a 25-minute independent learning activity, we don't think that would be unreasonable. And so those times will vary depending on the age and the grade of the student.
Okay, all right, excellent. Well, Dr. Smith, will the same classes, be offered that are being offered rather through the remote learning be available to students in the virtual academy as well? Will those same classes be offered in both?
So for the most part, and again, they will look slightly different because in remote learning, there are classes that, we have the face-to-face component. And so if there are labs associated with that, that gives the child the opportunity to complete that lab in a face-to-face setting. But for the most part, we've really tried to offer all the classes that we are offering in a remote learning setting in the virtual academy setting as well. And then the other thing I think it's important to recognize is that all classes aren't available at all schools. So I think especially if you're secondary, it would be really important to reach out to either your middle school principal or your high school principal to see if they're continuing those classes and what those classes are. I know, weightlifting is going to be really, really difficult to offer in the online environment. And so we may have made some substitutions, say for instance, going from weightlifting to team sports. But we are offering as many, I think there's probably just a few that will be available in both environments.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. We have some new parents joining on, so we're going to go back to some of those high school questions that you did answer previously. First, again, will you remind parents what Virtual Academy looks like in a high school setting and what platforms they will be using in high school?
So in high school, the primary platform will be Canvas. And if they're in the Virtual Academy, it could be Edgenuity as well. One thing that Edgenuity does is it allows for courses that are built out in Edgenuity to be transitioned to the Canvas platform. So if you're in remote learning, it's going to look at, it's going to appear more likely or not in the Canvas platform. But then if you're in Virtual Academy, then more likely then it's going to rest completely in the Edgenuity platform. Something else that I think is important to say is what we tried, even though we purchased these learning management systems and we have standardized around a lot of things, we also value the skills and expertise in the professionalism of our teachers. And so we've given teachers some flexibility to make some choices around their courses. And so I would say, if you've got a specific question, reach out to your child's teacher. But just know that, the two primary platforms, Edgenuity and Canvas in the high school, and primarily Edgenuity for the Virtual Academy.
And Dr. Smith, what about electives? PE, art, dance, music, those kind of things. Will they still be offered? If so, how will that work?
So our incredible arts educators have been working this summer to create those courses in Canvas. And so again, it will look very, very different. But those teachers have created, at least for the first 9 weeks, and then we're going to build out the rest of the 9 of the semester, those courses in Canvas. And so again, very few electives are we're not going to be able to offer. But then again, and I cannot stress enough, and I know it probably doesn't need to be said, but dance in the virtual, in the virtual world, in the remote learning world, looks very different than dance in the full-time face-to-face world.
Got time for just a couple more questions. Let's see. There was a comment you talked about earlier regarding the wait list and the applications for Virtual Academy. Can you please repeat what you said regarding that, Dr. Smith?
So we're asking families who feel strongly about their children not attending school face-to-face to go ahead and complete that Virtual Academy application. We've seen a lot of interest from families across the district, and so we're having to institute a wait list. But that will not begin until we close out our applications for Virtual Academy, which will be into business tomorrow.
All right, and then one final question. Can you go into more detail of what live teaching will look like? Is it just morning meetings and not online lessons?
So for each grade level, there is a schedule. And so the expectation is that following that schedule, if you've got an 8 o'clock class or you've got a 9 o'clock class or your ELA is at 10:10, then students would be expected to log on and their teacher would be present and their teacher would be delivering live instruction in that remote learning environment. Now, we recognize that in the best laid plans, because we weren't even completely sure, that actually driving home today through the thunderstorm, I wasn't completely sure that I might come into a home where the internet was working or that the lights were on. So we recognize that even with the best laid plans, there can be missteps and mishaps and things that are outside of our control. But our intention is to provide that live instruction on a regular schedule for students. So it may be, though, that it's a 90-minute period in the high school, but the teacher's instruction only lasts for 30 minutes. And so then the rest of the class might be scheduled as independent activity, or students are operating in shared Google Docs and things of that nature. But there will be live instruction at all grade levels on a regular basis in the remote learning, as a part of remote learning.
Thank you, Dr. Smith, for joining us this evening and sharing all of that information. Thank you, parents and families, for tuning in. As I stated earlier, we will do a second part to this series next Thursday, again at 6 o'clock, with Julie Varnum, Assistant Superintendent of Student Support Services, where she will talk more on special education and health and safety. We will do our final episode of this series on August 27th on operations with Eddie Anderson, and he will be talking to us about transportation, child nutrition, and facilities. For our Spanish-speaking families, we will be repeating this live again with the Latino Alliance tonight at 7, so you are free to tune in there. Thank you again for watching, and families, have a great evening.